Took her up somewhere nice in Kenya and proposed.
It's very romantic. There's a true romantic in that.
There is.
The palace sank into an unnatural stillness before the day had truly begun. Dawn crept slowly over Windsor, pale sunlight filtering through a thin curtain of mist, brushing against the ancient stone walls as if unsure whether it was welcome. This should have been an ordinary morning, shaped by long-established routines, predictable schedules, and the quiet precision that defined royal life. But from the very first breath of the day, something felt wrong. No announcement was needed. No words were exchanged. The air itself carried the warning. Inside the palace, silence pressed heavily against the walls. It was not peaceful. It was tense, restrained, a silence that felt as though it was holding its breath. Corridors that usually echoed with soft footsteps and the low murmur of staff were unnervingly still. People moved more slowly, instinctively lowering their voices, as if sound itself might fracture something fragile. Even the grandfather clock in the west corridor seemed hesitant, its steady ticking unusually subdued, as though time itself had grown cautious. Royal aides moved with controlled urgency. Their expressions were carefully neutral, masks perfected over years of service, yet their eyes betrayed what protocol could not conceal. They avoided lingering in one place. They avoided questions entirely. Closed doors drew glances filled with unease, and no one dared to speculate aloud. Beyond the palace gates, the world waited. News agencies hovered in anticipation. Correspondents from across the globe piled up. Supporters, well-wishers, and citizens held on to every carefully worded update regarding the Princess of Wales. Official statements were issued with flawless restraint, brief, composed, reassuring. Yet behind the polished language and practiced calm, the truth inside the palace was far more delicate. A quiet dread had settled in, one no official phrasing could erase. Catherine, beloved by millions, had been in hospital care for weeks. The public was told she was resting, recovering, surrounded by family. Inside the palace walls, however, the reality was far more uncertain. Doctors moved in and out of her private suite with solemn precision, their expressions guarded, their voices low. The medical wing, normally invisible, discreet, had become the emotional center of an entire kingdom. Prince William rarely left her side. Hours were spent pacing narrow corridors, phone clenched in his hand, eyes darting toward every vibration, every notification, as though one message might carry hope or finality. Those closest to him noticed the change immediately. He spoke only when necessary. His words were measured, sparse. Sleep came only when exhaustion forced it, and even then it was restless, shallow. His world had narrowed to a single purpose: to stay close, to hope, to wait. In public, he remained composed, dutiful, steady. Every inch, the pillar of continuity the monarchy required. But in private, the strain was unmistakable. The calm certainty that once lived in his eyes had been replaced by fatigue and fear. When he spoke her name, his voice faltered. Just slightly, but enough to be noticed by those who knew him best. That morning began like the others, until it didn't. A nurse appeared at the far end of the hallway. Her posture was professional, her expression serene, but her eyes revealed the tremor beneath the surface. She approached slowly, respectfully, stopping a short distance from him. "She's asking for you, Your Royal Highness." It was a simple sentence, yet in that instant time lost all structure. The world beyond the door, the press, the ceremonies, the expectations, ceased to exist. There was only the room ahead. William rose quietly. His breathing was shallow. He had walked through countless doors in his life, into council chambers, conflict zones, halls filled with centuries of history. None had ever felt as heavy as this one. Inside, the muted hum of medical machines filled the air, life reduced to measured rhythms and glowing numbers. Catherine lay in the bed, her face pale, yet luminous, in a way only she could be. Grace had always followed her, even here, even now. She turned her head when she saw him and offered a faint smile, the same smile that had once charmed the world, now free of fear, filled only with peace. William took her hand. It was cool, delicate, yet strong in its own quiet way. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Their silence carried more meaning than words ever could. The man who had stood before nations now felt powerless before the woman he loved. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "My love, promise me you will keep smiling. For them." He frowned slightly, not yet understanding. "For the people," she clarified gently. "They need to see hope in your eyes, even when I am gone." The word gone hung in the air, fragile, heavy, final. William's chest tightened. He had known this moment might come, but knowing was not the same as accepting. "Don't speak like that," he whispered, pressing her hand to his lips. "You're getting stronger." Catherine smiled again. Slow, knowing, unwavering. "You've always been my strength," she said softly, "and I've always been your peace." Something inside him broke, more deeply than any public tragedy ever had. Sensing the sanctity of the moment, the nurse slipped silently from the room. Morning light filtered through the window, bathing Catherine in gold, the kind of light that belongs to memories. "I want you to tell the children stories," she murmured. "Make them laugh. Let them remember joy when they think of me." "Catherine, please." His voice trembled. "We both know," she said gently, "that some goodbyes begin long before they're spoken. But this is not the end." She continued, her gaze steady. "When you see George smile, when Charlotte sings, when Louis laughs at your silly jokes, remember me, I'll be there." Tears traced silently down William's face. For years he had been taught that emotion must never breach the armor of duty. In this moment, duty meant nothing. Only love remained. "Heaven has its own way of staying near," she whispered. Then came silence, not empty but profound. A silence that lingered because it carried something eternal. William bowed his head, his body shaking quietly. The faint hum of machines blended with the distant toll of the palace clock striking 12. Outside, the world moved on, unaware that within these walls everything had changed. He whispered apologies, promises, memories woven through tears. When he finally stood, his shoulders felt impossibly heavy. His heart was fractured, yet still beating, because even in her final moments, she had left him purpose. As he stepped back into the corridor, the nurse waited. Their eyes met. No words were needed. The silence returned, deeper now, spreading through the palace like a veil. The world still believed in recovery, in hope, in another update. But within Windsor, everyone knew something sacred had ended. For the first time in a very long while, the palace felt less like a monument of history and more like an ordinary home that had just lost someone irreplaceable. He walked past the portraits without truly seeing them. Kings, queens, soldiers, monarchs frozen in oil and gold, watching in eternal silence. For the first time in his life, the weight of legacy felt unbearable. The crown, the bloodline, the destiny mapped out since birth. None of it could repair what had just been broken beyond reach. At the end of the corridor, he stopped. He turned back once, toward the door he had left behind. His voice was barely more than breath, meant for no one but the walls that had witnessed everything. "Good night, my darling." And with that, the future king stepped into the longest night of his life. Grief unfolded not with spectacle, but with quiet invasion. Corridors never designed to hold sorrow. Only ceremony, tradition, and protocol now carried it in every shadow. That morning, silence moved like fog through the ancient stone and polished floors. Staff adjusted instinctively. Movements softened. Words vanished. No one knew whether to bow, to speak, or to simply disappear. Even acknowledgement felt dangerous, as though sound itself might fracture something sacred. William sat alone in the chapel. The scent of extinguished candles lingered in the air, blending with cold marble and centuries of whispered prayer. His uniform lay folded beside him, abandoned. In that moment, the crown had slipped away entirely. He was not a prince, not an heir, only a man grieving the woman he loved. Light filtered through stained glass, deep crimson, fading blue, spilling across the pews like sorrow painted in color. He did not sob. His grief was quieter, heavier. It settled into him, into his bones, refusing to move. No one approached him. Even courtiers hardened by decades of duty hesitated at the chapel doors, uncertain how to exist in the presence of something so raw. Eventually, Queen Camilla entered. Her steps were slow, her expression steady, though her eyes shone with unhidden emotion. She said nothing at first. She simply rested her hand on his shoulder. "She was light," William murmured. Every room she entered felt alive. Camilla nodded gently. "And she still is," she said softly. "Light doesn't disappear, it changes form." He turned to her then, stripped of composure, stripped of title. "How do you keep breathing?" he asked, almost childlike, "when the air doesn't feel like it belongs to you anymore?" Camilla paused before answering. "You remember," she said, "that the air is filled with them. Every breath carries love that never left." Beyond the chapel walls, preparations were already beginning. The chief press secretary met with senior aides. Words were tested, reshaped, weighed. Each sentence rehearsed for dignity, restraint, and care. Somewhere else in the palace, hearts were breaking quietly. King Charles waited. He seemed older when William entered his study, as though time had accelerated its toll in a single night. No titles passed between them, no formalities. Charles rose and pulled his son into his arms. For the first time in years, the crown fractured completely. "Take time," Charles whispered. "The nation will wait." William shook his head. "She wouldn't want delay," he said. "She'd want me to keep going, for the children." Charles nodded, understanding written clearly across his face. "Then let the nation grieve with you," he said. "You don't have to carry this alone." As evening fell, the first vigil began. Candles flickered to life outside Buckingham Palace as the sky darkened to amber and violet. Thousands gathered without instruction, without announcement. They came carrying flowers, photographs, handwritten letters. No one told them to mourn. They simply knew. Television crews arrived, but their usual urgency dissolved. Voices dropped to whispers. Even the press seemed to recognize that this was not a story. It was a wound. "The nation waits," one anchor said quietly, the words heavy with what remained unspoken. Inside the palace, William sat with his children. The nursery was unchanged. Books lay where they always had. Toys waited untouched. The faint scent of Catherine's perfume lingered in the pillows, comforting and devastating all at once. George sat closest to him, his small hand resting against his father's leg. Charlotte's eyes darted anxiously between her brothers. Louis leaned into William's side, too young to understand the permanence of what had happened, but old enough to feel the stillness. William inhaled slowly before speaking. "Mommy loved you more than words can ever say," he whispered. His voice held barely. "She told me something for us," he continued. George looked up, his lip trembling. "What did she say, Papa?" William hesitated, her voice echoing painfully clear in his memory. "She said when we see each other smile," he said, "we'll see her too." The room remained silent as the meaning settled. Then Charlotte climbed into his lap. "Can she see us now?" she whispered. His throat tightened. "Yes, my darling," he said. "She's watching us right now." Louis pointed toward the window. "Is she in the stars?" William smiled through tears. "Yes," he said softly. "Maybe the brightest one." Beyond the nursery door, Carol and Michael Middleton stood together, arms wrapped tightly around one another. They were no longer figures of royal association. They were parents grieving their child. Staff members passed quietly, many unable to keep tears from their eyes. That night, Windsor slept uneasily. The palace, so often alive with preparation and purpose, felt hollow. Every echo carried memory. Every portrait seemed to watch. Near midnight, William returned to the chapel. He lit a single candle at the altar. The flame trembled, then steadied, reflecting in his tear-streaked eyes. He knelt, hands loosely clasped. "Thank you," he whispered. No elaboration was needed. Outside, the wind moved through the gardens, rustling the magnolia trees she loved. It sounded almost like a sigh. By dawn, the statement was released. 37 carefully chosen words traveled across the world, carrying unimaginable weight. The Princess of Wales passed peacefully, surrounded by her family. Bells rang across cities and villages, flags lowered. A nation held its breath. And as the sun rose once more over Windsor, the palace stood unchanged in stone, but forever altered in spirit. She showed the world that compassion does not bow to power, that kindness itself is a form of courage. His words echoed through the vast cathedral, carried far beyond its stone walls into hospitals she had visited, into classrooms across England where teachers spoke softly to students about her work, and into homes where children drew pictures of her smiling face and taped them to windows as quiet tributes. In a quiet corner of Berkshire, Carol and Michael Middleton sat side by side, their hands tightly clasped. For them, this was not a royal tragedy, not history unfolding before cameras. It was the loss of a daughter who had once baked cakes in their kitchen, laughed at small mistakes, and found joy in ordinary moments. She never tried to be perfect, Carol whispered to a friend. She was only trying to be kind. That evening, the rain eased and the clouds parted, revealing a pale stretch of blue over London. At exactly 8 o'clock, the palace called for a moment of national reflection. Across the United Kingdom, lights dimmed. Big Ben stood silent. Cities grew still. Millions held candles in windows, on doorsteps, in gardens. At Windsor, William stood on the terrace with his children. Below them, candlelight stretched into the distance like a river of gold. Charlotte leaned against his arm and whispered, "Mummy would like all the lights." He smiled faintly, eyes shining. "Yes, my love," he said softly. She would. The following morning, newspapers around the world carried the same image, Catherine's portrait, framed in gentle light. Beneath it, headlines spoke of humility, compassion, and a quiet strength that had redefined what it meant to be royal. Not through spectacle, but through presence. In Parliament, the Prime Minister's voice broke as she addressed the chamber. "Her Royal Highness taught us that true leadership lies in empathy," she said. "She will remain not only in our history, but in our hearts." Even those who had never met Catherine felt her absence like the loss of a family member. Strangers left flowers for someone they had known only through screens, yet felt deeply connected to. The nation's grief transcended protocol. Back at Windsor, preparations for the funeral began quietly. Plans written years earlier under the code name Operation Lily were set in motion. The palace ensured dignity and care, but William made one request above all others: no excess, no grandeur. He wanted her farewell to reflect who she had truly been: elegant, humble, radiant in simplicity. As days passed, the royal family gathered strength together. The Queen Consort oversaw ceremonial details. The king met daily with advisors. Yet all eyes turned toward William, who practiced his memorial speech alone in an empty room, reading aloud to the still air. "She was my compass," he whispered. "She showed me how to lead without hardness, how to serve without pride." When he reached the line about smiling for the children, his voice faltered. He lowered the paper and looked out over the courtyard, where the scent of rain mingled with the perfume of flowers lining the gates. Beyond them, the crowd continued to grow, candles reflecting in puddles, quiet sobs drifting upward. And standing there, William finally understood her final words. Heaven indeed had its own way of staying near. In the weeks that followed, time moved differently, slower, heavier. The palace resumed its routines, but the rhythm had changed. Footsteps echoed longer, voices softened. Even the gardens seemed to mourn. Yet something gentle began to emerge. The world did not forget Catherine. It remembered her with rare tenderness. Her words appeared in classrooms. Murals bloomed with her likeness. Her work with children and mental health continued through those she had inspired. Her kindness became something living, passed quietly from hand to hand. William felt this most each morning when he heard laughter down the corridor. The children were awake, and in that laughter he heard her dot. He began taking them on walks again, through Windsor's gardens, beneath the magnolias, along the narrow paths by the water. George walked ahead, hands in his pockets, trying to look grown. Charlotte gathered wildflowers. Louis darted from tree to tree, chasing his shadow. William followed, his grief tempered now by gratitude. His posture remained regal, but his eyes held new depth. Warmth, softness. At public engagements, he lingered longer, clasped hands more firmly, looked people fully in the eye. Love had changed him. When the day of the memorial arrived, Windsor was wrapped in pale mist. St. George's Chapel stood golden in the morning light, bells tolling gently. World leaders and citizens filled the grounds, yet the atmosphere felt intimate, like a family gathering rather than a state ceremony. Inside, the choir sang her favorite hymn, voices rising toward the vaulted ceiling. The children sat in the front row, hands clasped together. William rose when his turn came, the cathedral falling into perfect silence. "She was my compass," he began, steady but human. "She taught me that strength and gentleness are not opposites, but partners. That kindness can rebuild the world one act at a time." He paused, breath-catching. "She told me that when I see our children smile, I will see her, and I do, every day." He asked not for mourning, but for continuation. "Carry her example forward," he said. "Live her kindness. Let her light guide you." When he stepped back, the crowd rose in silent unity. Bells rang once more, their echo carrying across fields and into millions of homes around the world. Life moved on, forever altered. William read bedtime stories in the same voice that once made Catherine laugh. He visited her charities quietly, without cameras, each act of service a conversation with her spirit. In the palace garden, he commissioned a small statue, not of triumph, but of grace. Catherine sat on a stone bench, smiling gently, hands open. 3 children stood nearby, each holding a flower. Beneath it, an inscription read, Where kindness reigns, love never dies. Visitors came, leaving notes of gratitude rather than sorrow. At night, when the palace grew quiet, William walked alone beneath the magnolias, stopping before the statue to whisper the same words he had spoken at her bedside. Heaven has its own way of staying near, and in that stillness he felt peace. History would remember Catherine as the Princess of Wales, but to William she was something far greater. His home, his anchor, his reason. Through her, the monarchy rediscovered its heart, because her greatest legacy was not ceremony or title, but love, quiet, steadfast, and enduring. A love that reminded the world that behind every crown beats a human heart, capable of breaking, capable of healing, and capable of hope. If this story moved you, honor her legacy by showing kindness to someone today. Subscribe for more royal stories, where behind every crown lies a heartbeat, and behind every headline, a human soul.